Welcome. We're going to work through this question before us and see what we can do with it. It says, write down the equation of the image of y equals the square root of x when the following transformations have been applied. A reflection in the x-axis followed by a translation of 7 units in the positive y direction. Now this is a very simple transformation here and we shouldn't have to use by the method. We should be able to do it by inspection. So we're starting with y is equal to the square root of x. And then we're told that we're going to do a reflection in the x-axis. That means we put a negative in front of the whole thing. Then followed by a translation of 7 units in the positive y direction. That just means you plus 7 to the whole thing. And just like that, we're done. We move on. All right, the next one. So again, we're starting with y is equal to the square root of x, but now we're performing a dilation by a factor of 7 from the y-axis, followed by a reflection in the y-axis, followed by a translation of 3 units in the positive x direction and 5 units in the negative y direction. So a few things going on here. The first thing that we're doing here is we're performing a dilation by a factor of 7 from the y-axis. Now, we're doing this by inspection, and when you're dilating from the y-axis by inspection, what you have to remember is that it's going to be the reciprocal of that number. So I'm replacing x with 1 on 7x. Then it says followed by a reflection in the y-axis. That means I'm going to replace the x with negative x. So that will have the effect of just making this a negative there. Followed by a translation of 3 units in the positive x direction. That means I replace the x with x minus 3, because that's going to move it 3 in the positive x direction. And take note of how I replace the x with x minus 3. And then lastly, 5 units in the negative y direction means I minus the whole thing by 5. And just like that, we're done. We've performed our transformation. We've done that by inspection, which is pretty quick. And with enough practice, you should be able to do it nice and quickly like that. If you want to do it instead by the method, that is also a legitimate way to do it. Let's go through how to go about that. But again, in a test, you wouldn't do it both ways, would you? You would choose one way and do it that way. That's how you're going to do this as quickly as possible. You're not going to do both ways. All right, so if I'm doing it by the method, I'm starting with a point and I'm going to my new point, which I'm calling x dash y dash. Now, this new point is going to be dilated by a factor of 7 from the y. So that means it's going to affect my x. So it's going to be 7 times x, and is also reflected in the y-axis. So that means I put a negative in front of my x. Remember that dilations and reflections affect the x value, and that's why I'm putting it next to the x there. Followed by a translation of 3 units in the positive x direction. So that means I plus 3 to my x, and then, whoopsie daisy, just moved. Then I'm going to go y minus 5, because I'm going 5 units in the negative y direction. Having done all that now, I can say that my x dash is going to be equal to negative 7x plus 3, and my y dash is going to be equal to y minus 5. So that means I'm going to end up with x dash minus 3 over negative 7 is equal to x, and then over here, I'm going to get y dash plus 5 is equal to y. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sub both of these into my rule. So remember, my rule is y equals the square root of x. Into my y spot, I'm going to put in y dash plus 5. And into my x spot here, I'm going to have to make this nice and big, I'm going to put this right here. Now remember, I could write this a different way. I could write this as negative 1 on 7 times x minus 3. That's also an acceptable way to write it. Either way you write it is fine, but the reason why I'm showing you that is so that you can see that that's what we had there. And then of course the last step here is to simply minus that 5 over. And so now I have this. And then I'm going to minus 5 there. And just like that, I am done. So as you can see, that is the same as what I got when I did it by inspection. So it's now just a question of what do you feel most comfortable with? You wouldn't do both ways. You want to do this as quickly as possible. All right, I'll see you in the next one.